Welcome to Convergence. My name's Michael Doran. Albert Einstein once said that among the most difficult problems in all of physics is the Earth's magnetic field. I'm a California lawyer, and I'm going to argue that the most difficult problem in all of biology is the Earth's magnetic field. Today I'd like to talk about sperm whales. Very interesting article from whalefacts.org. Sperm whales are the deepest diving marine mammal in the world. The marine mammal can dive over, this is an article, it's not dated, but again it's on whalefacts.org under sperm whale. This marine mammal can dive over 6,000 feet underwater when hunting for food. However, most of the time, their dives are no more than 2,600 feet. While some information has been uncovered regarding these excellent hunters' diets, their hunting methods have not been well researched due to the deep dives that these whales make when hunting for food. Because of their ability to travel so far underwater, studying or recording their behaviors has been difficult. However, stomach content and rare observations have given us some idea of what the sperm whale's typical diet looks like. Sperm whales eat giant and colossal squid, octopus, cephalopods, and as you know, I did a prior show on that, cuttlefish, which is a cephalopod, and various other fish. However, their primary diet consists mainly of squid, and since they eat food that lives in reasonably deep water, they do not have to worry about their food being captured by fishermen and other marine mammals. In addition to having prey that lives well beyond the threats of human and other marine mammals, giant squid rarely has any predators in the deep waters that they live in. This allows the sperm whale to maintain an abundant food source without interruption from other animals, even those that live in deep waters. As stated earlier, most of what is known about the sperm whale's squid diet has been studied from the contents of the sperm whale's stomach. While researchers haven't been able to witness any battles between a sperm whale and the colossal squid, which can measure over 45 feet and weigh more than 1,000 pounds, the markings on the sperm whale's head indicate struggles they've had while trying to consume this species of squid. These situations, it appears that the giant squid latches onto the sperm whale's head with its tentacles to avoid being eaten. When the sperm whale rises to the surface, markings can be found in and around the sperm whale's head, which appears to be caused by battles with a giant squid they're trying to consume. Compared to the colossal squid, these marine mammals eat adult sperm whales that can the sperm whales eat the colossal squid that can grow to lengths over 50 feet long and weigh, and now this article is a little confusing. The sperm whales can grow to 50 feet long and weigh more than 45 tons, with the large sperm whales growing to lengths of up to 67 feet long. That would be the males. In terms of their habitat, sperm males can swim throughout the world's major oceans and are the largest marine mammals within the toothed whale suborder. So you have your phytoplankton consuming whales, basically they're vegetarians, but these are the giant squid eating whales. Unfortunately, due to excessive whaling efforts, it is estimated that whalers killed as many as 1 million sperm whales over the last few centuries, which is now causing an imbalance in the ocean's ecosystem and affecting our ozone layer. Rough estimates suggest that there are now around 200,000 sperm whales left in the world's ocean, which may seem like a lot, but it's much less before whaling industry began. Studies have shown that the nutrients and the sperm whale's poop helps stimulate phytoplankton growth, which pulls carbon from the air, providing a cleaner and healthier environment for all animals. It's estimated as much as 400,000 tons of carbon are extracted from the air due to these whales each year. If all the estimates are accurate, then the additional carbon that could have been extracted from the air by sperm whales has been the additional carbon that could have been extracted from the air by the sperm whales that were killed would have amounted to a lot more clean air and a much more balanced and healthy oceanic and land-based ecosystem. Well, I'm going to disagree and agree with some of what's being said here, but I have to start out with what we're talking about. So we're talking about a sperm whale that dives to great depths to get giant squid. And the oceans are well stratified. What does that mean? That means because of the temperature differences between the ocean, the warm part of the ocean sits on top of the cold part. It's called the thermohaline. Doesn't move very much. And the thermohaline, because it's warmer, think warm beer. It doesn't hold any carbonation. Cold, frosty beer holds a lot of carbonation. But because the oceans are stratified with a thermohaline on top, there's not as much carbon dioxide in the surface of the ocean. And other nutrients too. As soon as there are nutrients in the ocean, then you'll get phytoplankton consuming them. You'll get other life consuming and starting a food chain. And that's why the La Nina is so interesting, because you get upwelling of cold, nutrient-rich water. It starts a food chain. It holds more carbonation, has life with cells that contain more chemistries. It starts a food chain. Whereas your El Nino, which means the warm one in the tropical Pacific, in that area, that warm ocean is going to hold less carbonation. So even though it has more energy, it holds less carbonation. And that's been a fundamental problem for a living Earth, because it started out, the brains of the Earth started out in nucleotides and cloud droplets. And the cloud droplets are enhanced by carbonation. They organize better with carbonation. And even though the nucleotides could be modeled and feedback in RNA acid, DNA is DN acid, RNA acid, is also an acid that affects the freeze rates of clouds and supercool clouds and electric fields. You have with warm oceans less ability to hold carbonation, and so when a surface low goes by, it's putting less carbonation into the clouds. So anything that gets carbonation closer and being able to be into the clouds is going to have more of an effect on how the carbonation levels modulate or dampen the Earth's magnetic field, because ultimately clouds produce lightning, and lightning produces the Earth's magnetic field and dampens it, and deals with all, in the context of light, deals with all the chaotic or random inputs that come into the Earth's climate system and provides a stable Earth magnetic field. In the climate sciences, the state of science here, which is not good, is looking at a coupling between the ocean and the air. And what they mean by that, and the typical one that's being talked about is El Nino. What they mean by that is that they believe that the ocean temperatures drive climate, and that there's a coupling then between the behavior of the air and what goes on with the ocean. If you have an El Nino, then you're going to have this behavior. You're going to have a La Nina, you're going to have this behavior. It's not the other way around, where what's going on in the air drives what's going on in the ocean. And that's where it's not correct. There's no question that the ocean temperature has this effect on carbonation. There's no question that these models that are produced with coupling look at ocean temperatures and what that means for cloud dynamics, and whether there's latent heat in the ocean to drive clouds. But the complexity here is electrical, and the electrical complexity is very sensitive to carbonation levels. And this is where life comes in. And because the thermohaline is so depleted of nutrients, this is why a mammal like the sperm whale is so significant, because what it does is it goes down into the part of the ocean that is in the cold part of the ocean, where there might be nutrients, but there is a tremendous lacking of connection between the bottom of the ocean or the depths of the ocean and the clouds where where the modulation or the dampening occurs. So getting the nutrients, the whale poo essentially, which increases carbonation of the ocean, and it's not just that it's a fertilizer and starts food chain that can contain carbonation like phytoplankton, but it's the fact that the poo itself is basically carbonation. It's decomposing material which gives off carbonation. That is your source of carbonation. That surface lows, weather, can pick that carbonation up and put it into clouds and then have it dampen. So it connects ultimately the Earth magnetic field to life by moving that life, the carbon life, from ocean bottom to the ocean surface. And that's what sperm whales do. And so this is why the million deaths of whales is such a significant human activity in terms of hurting a living Earth and what it did. And so I want to explain a little bit about redundancy. Richard Nixon, his wife had, I think, breast cancer. And even though he's a conservative and a Republican, as we think of that politic today, he went on a rampage and he said, I want to end cancer. And from that, ultimately, the Human Genome Project comes from, but the National Institute of Health began to look at cancer. And when cancer was first looked at, the idea was that there was genes that were defective that caused basically the body not to recognize the cancer, because cancer is self. So the immune system is like, it differentiates between self and non-self, and so it really has trouble destroying cancer, which is self, and so you have these defective genes that cause tissue to grow and divide without control, and you get a cancer. Well, as that research has developed and gone on, what we've learned, what scientists have learned, and this is textbook stuff, I'm not saying anything that's extraordinary, is that there's redundancy, meaning that it's the oncogenes that cause cancer. It's not just one, it's multiple. Many genes go awry and then cause a situation where you have cells that grow and divide uncontrollably and you get cancer. Well, the same sort of redundancy exists in the biosphere. So even though we've taken out humans through hunting of sperm whales, have taken out 1 million sperm whales, and these are massive creatures, basically massive creatures that are moving materials from the depths of the ocean. They're eating a creature that's largely brain and tissue, as I talked about in the cephalopods. And they're doing so with the ability, with a huge brain, an ability to navigate with the Earth's magnetic field. Whales do that. And so they're going to be very sensitive and be able to dampen the Earth's magnetic field in tremendous ways, affecting cloud behaviors, just due to their size, due to the fact that they're moving something up a thermodynamic gradient, because biological material is going to sink down, including the sperm whales. When they die, the sperm whales become fertilizer for the depths of the ocean and start a food chain of themselves. But the idea is getting carbonation to the ocean surface, and then ultimately surface flows, removing that carbonation. It's like shaking a beer and cracking it open, and the low brings the carbonation up into the clouds, where it affects cloud microphysics in the context of electrical fields. It dampens, it changes the Earth's magnetic field. But there's other processes that are occurring that also are going to affect carbonation in the ocean. So for instance, the storm itself really roils and agitates the ocean and brings nutrients up, and that starts food chains. And then the carbonation concentrates with, say, phytoplankton that begins to grow. And then you'll actually get, because carbonation in general rises with one storm after time. So what happens is a storm removes carbonation, and it takes about 2 weeks for the carbonation to come back from ambient winds. It's the low pressure in the winds that remove the carbonation from the ocean surface. And there was a study by Bates et al. They were looking at the carbon cycle in about 2001 out of Harvard. And they found that 1/3 of the carbonation was removed by Hurricane Felix as it went over the Atlantic Ocean. They also found that it took about 2 weeks for the carbonation levels to come back. But in addition to that kind of a natural process occurring, when you roil the oceans and bring up cold, nutrient-rich water, it provides better conditions for phytoplankton to bloom, then the phytoplankton to remove the carbonation from the oceans, from the air, and then put it into the surface ocean. And then as that phytoplankton dies, it gives carbonation to the water. And what has been seen is that it's so significant that one storm after another follows the area where the phytoplankton blooms have occurred along the storm tracks. And this has been seen by satellite imagery, where you see the storm track, and then a few weeks later you see the phytoplankton bloom, and then following that you see another storm track along the same area of ocean that had the phytoplankton bloom. And so you get a feedback, you get a behavior, a storm pattern that ultimately leads to a lightning pattern, which then leads to dampening of the Earth's magnetic field. What I'm saying is that there are other pathways that get it done in terms of getting carbonation to the ocean, but there's redundancy involved here. And we may not have seen yet conditions where there's such extreme inputs or conditions in there's electrical field that what the sperm whale is doing and has done has come to be that significant. So let me give you an example. Let's say that there was a tremendous volcanic event, and it caused a darkening of the skies and an abrupt type of an input into what's going on in the land, the terrasphere. Well, would that affect what's going on in the depth of the oceans? Probably not as much. And so as the sperm whales going down and feeding on the cephalopods, the giant squid, wouldn't have anything to do with that volcanic activity. And then the sperm whale would bring the its poo basically to the ocean surface. And if there wasn't as much light for, pardon me, if there wasn't as much light for phytoplankton to bloom because of the volcanic activity causing a haze and lower amounts of light coming in, you still would have carbonation in the ocean surface that would allow a signal to be given to, again, dampen or modulate the Earth's magnetic field. So I think that a lot of these feedbacks are redundancies that we don't even know about in doing the job that they do to dampen or modulate the Earth's magnetic field. And so it comes back to this idea of how the current state of the sciences is that CO2 is a greenhouse gas, and it's interesting in that way, when it really is not. It's interesting in cloud droplets that are supercooled in clouds, and the rate at which they freeze what cloud organizations occur. And then clouds are much, much more powerful greenhouse gas. So what we're talking about is CO2 is, if you have a column of air and you're talking about how much is trapped by CO2 as a greenhouse gas. So it's this idea, if I'm a sea and my fists are oxygen, when a light photon hits the carbon dioxide, it moves around and dances, right? And that's heat energy. And so CO2 is a greenhouse gas. And so with that, we're talking about 4 watts per meter squared. So if you have this column of air and light comes down into that column of air, some of the air is going to hit this trace gas called carbon dioxide. It's going to make it dance, and it's going to heat up that column of air by 4 watts per meter squared. Well, when you talk about clouds, you can have fog which reflects 100 watts per meter squared. Or if you talk about cirrus clouds, which are the clouds on top of tropical storm, which are the most heat-trapping clouds, and you're talking about 200 watts per meter squared. The other part of it, and that's just the statics of it, the other part of it is the dynamics. So you have this idea that the clouds cause frontal movements that act like a heat pump dynamically and then affect temperatures and high and low pressures. It affects the mixing between the tropics and the poles. All these different types of energy movements are interesting, and way more interesting than the heat trapping of 4 watts per meter squared. And it's not 4 watts per meter squared when you're talking about the added carbon dioxide. It's that differential. So if during 500 years ago, you were talking about 70 parts per million of carbon dioxide, and now you're at 400 parts per million. It's that difference between 270 and 400 that we have to figure out how much additional heat trapping is involved in that 4 watts per meter squared. So maybe it goes from 3 watts per meter squared, I'm just making this up, to 5 watts per meter squared with the additional carbon dioxide. And that's why scientists are always talking about amplification, and it goes back to clouds and cloud behaviors. And, living here in California, some of this has made zero sense because we're in the middle of the drought. So if there's no clouds, how can this 4 watts per meter squared result in a drought? There's no water to amplify. It's a drought. And this is why it's so frustrating for me to listen to respectfully greenhouse gas warmers, because the real mechanism is CO2 in cloud droplets in the context of electrical fields. And that's where life is involved, and that's where, in this case, the sperm whale is involved. And there's more than one source of a protection that the Earth has through life to maintain or dampen the Earth's magnetic field. That was the fundamental problem. Because again, if the Earth's magnetic field was too strong, you'd get Jupiter, you'd get Neptune, you'd get Saturn, you'd get a gas giant and a dead planet. And if the Earth's magnetic field was not strong enough, like Mars, you'd get no atmosphere, dead planet. And that's ultimately the problem that the nucleotides came to solve by being both a model, an acid in the clouds, but being a specific changing acid that affected whether the clouds were trapping heat or not, and then producing the perfect Earth magnetic field. So now getting back to the sperm whale. Having said all that and about redundancy, will the sperm whale make a comeback? I think it's, even when the numbers start getting up there, I think we should continue to protect this species because what it's doing, the sperm whale, is taking squid and basically moving biological material to the ocean surface where they can, where these feedbacks and can occur in an intelligent way with a creature which is sensitive to the Earth's magnetic field, migrates with the Earth's magnetic field, has a giant brain. We're just learning about what that giant brain can do. It's one of the largest brains in the animal kingdom. And so even though there's this redundancy, some of the redundancy is not understood. So when we're removing huge amounts of carbon from outside of the active biosphere and putting it into the atmosphere, we're also certainly going to be affecting the phytoplankton populations, just like whale poo would. And when we're removing huge amounts of fossil fertilizer from outside of the active biosphere, and then they flow down the oceans, and we get dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico, for instance, we're also affecting what carbonation is available, again, to dampen the Earth's magnetic field. So that certainly has changed since the whaling killed so many whales, the million whales, and so it's not particularly well understood how this redundancy would play, but I think it's just another example of human activity that needs to be understood better with the actual mechanisms that are involved, and the fact that the quantum brain of life has moved from nucleotides and clouds into creatures like the sperm whale. Okay, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe, please like, and have a great day. Thank you for watching and spending your time with me all the way to this point. Okay, turn it off.